What would you do if a stranger knelt down in front of your child and began to pray? David Morrison was a man of control, used to solving everything with logic and planning, but he completely lost his composure when this happened. This is the story of the miracle of the Virgin Mary that began in the most unexpected way. But before we continue, leave a comment saying where you are watching from and what time it is there right now. I would love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. Do you know that kind of person who needs to have an answer for everything? David Morrison was that kind of person, an architect for 23 years. Every morning he woke up at 6, black coffee with no sugar, arrived at the office at 8. His world was made of straight lines, perfect angles, calculations that always added up. When a client brought a problem, David was already 3 steps ahead with the solution. To him, everything had a solution. Everything could be resolved with proper planning and correct execution. Everything, until life showed that there are things that cannot be designed. David was a widower. Sarah had passed away during the birth of Ava, leaving him with the difficult task of being both father and mother at the same time. He did the best he could. He worked hard, built a stable life, gave his daughter everything within his reach. But above all, he gave her ballet. Ava was 18 years old and had been dancing since she was 6. It started as a hobby, something to burn off energy. But it quickly became clear that she had talent, a lot of talent. The teachers noticed first, the way she absorbed corrections, how her movements flowed naturally, how she didn't just execute the steps, but felt them. By the age of 10, she was already in advanced classes. At 12, she began competing. And at 18, she was weeks away from signing a contract with a major company. Ballet wasn't just what Ava did, it was who she was. David saw this every time she came back from rehearsals. Her eyes shining, her body tired but radiant. She spoke about movements as if they were poetry. Their house had a large mirror in the living room. Ava practiced there every night, even after hours of formal rehearsal. David watched her from the couch, pretending to read some project, but in truth simply admiring how his daughter had become this extraordinary person. Do you know that feeling of looking at someone and thinking, "How did I get so lucky?" She was his masterpiece. Until that Tuesday in March. Ava was rehearsing for an important performance. She would be seen by directors from 3 different companies, an opportunity that could define her entire career. David wasn't there when it happened. He was at the office reviewing a commercial project when the phone rang. It was the director of the dance school. Her voice sounded strange, too controlled. "Mr. Morrison, there has been an accident. Ava fell during a rehearsal. We're going to the hospital now. Meet us there." The words that followed were lost. David was already running. At the hospital, the doctors used technical words: trauma, loss of motor function. But what David understood was much simpler and far more devastating. Ava would never walk again. She would never dance again. She would never be who she was again. The months that followed were the hardest of David's life. Ava went through 2 surgeries, weeks in the hospital. Then came the wheelchair, and then physical therapy. 3 times a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, David took Ava to the rehabilitation clinic. It was 20 minutes from their house in a quiet area near the river. The routine was always the same. They arrived 15 minutes before the session. David pushed the wheelchair through the wide, clean hallways. The smell of alcohol and hospital disinfectant was everywhere. Ava stayed quiet, looking at her own hands resting in her lap. The physical therapist, Karen, was competent and kind. She guided Ava through the exercises with infinite patience, assisted movements, stretching, muscle stimulation. "Let's try one more time, Ava. I know it hurts, but we need to keep those muscles active." And Ava tried. Each session lasted an hour. For David, it felt like it lasted days. He sat in the hallway chairs, watching through the glass window. He saw his daughter struggling against a body that no longer obeyed her. He saw the frustration in every movement. He saw the ballerina who used to fly now trapped in a chair. And there was nothing he could do, nothing he could design, nothing he could fix. For the first time in his life, David Morrison was completely powerless. Have you ever felt like that? Completely unable to help someone you love? After each session, Ava returned to the wheelchair exhausted. Karen helped her get positioned, checked if she was comfortable, offered her water. Ava only nodded without the energy for words. David packed her things, pushed the wheelchair to the car, folded the chair, and put it in the trunk. The drive back home was always silent. Ava looked out the window. David kept his eyes on the road. Neither of them knew what to say. What words exist for this kind of pain? At home, David helped Ava settle onto the couch. He prepared dinner, usually something simple that she ate without appetite. Then she went to her bedroom, and David stayed alone in the living room, staring at the mirror where she used to dance. The months passed like this. Nothing changed. The doctors had been clear. There was no hope of significant recovery. The most they could do was maintain her quality of life. David tried to accept that, tried to be strong, tried to focus on what Ava could still do instead of what she had lost. But inside, something in him was breaking. On a Tuesday, he almost canceled physical therapy. He was sitting in the car, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the clinic entrance. Ava waited beside him, quiet as always. "Dad, aren't we going in?" He wanted to say no. He wanted to turn the car around and never come back. What difference did it make? Nothing was getting better. Nothing was going to get better. "Let's go," he finally said, unlocking the doors. But how much longer could he keep going like this? It was on Thursday of that same week, late in the afternoon, that everything changed. The physical therapy session had ended. Ava was exhausted, her face pale from the effort. Karen had helped her back into the wheelchair and was now making notes on her clipboard. David was putting away Ava's things when he heard footsteps in the hallway. He turned and saw a young man walking toward them. He looked about 18 years old. He was wearing jeans and a light blue button-down shirt. He carried a backpack over his shoulders. The young man stopped a few meters away. He stood there, looking at Ava, not with morbid curiosity or pity, just looking, as if he were processing something. David frowned. Who was this kid? What did he want? Then the young man stepped closer, straight up to Ava. "May I pray for you?" The question came out simple, direct, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Before David or Ava could respond, the young man knelt right there on the cold hallway floor. He clasped his hands and closed his eyes, and he began to pray. Softly, almost in a whisper, but loud enough for them to hear fragments. "Virgin Mary, watch over her, help her get better, take care of her." David froze for a few seconds, his brain trying to process what was happening. Then the anger came. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice echoed down the hallway, louder than he intended, but he didn't care. The boy kept praying. He didn't look up. He didn't stop. He simply continued his prayer as if David hadn't spoken. "Hey!" David stepped forward. "I'm talking to you. Get up." Karen turned, surprised by his tone. Ava's eyes widened. "Dad!" But David wasn't listening. All the frustration, all the fear, all the helplessness of the past few months exploded in that moment. The boy finished the prayer at his own pace. He made the sign of the cross. Only then did he open his eyes and stand up. "I asked the Virgin Mary to take care of her," he said calmly. "No one asked for your prayers?" David felt the words come out harsh, sharp. "You have no right to kneel in front of my daughter and—" "Ethan!" A woman came running down the hallway. She looked to be in her early 40s, wearing a simple work uniform, her face immediately marked by concern. "Ethan, what happened?" She looked at David, at Ava, then back at the boy. She sensed the tension in the air instantly. "Mr. Morrison," she said, recognizing him. It was Margaret, who worked at the clinic's reception desk. "I'm sorry, my son saw your daughter and wanted to—" "Your son can't go around doing things like this," David cut her off. The words came out harsher than he intended. "My daughter doesn't need this." Margaret swallowed hard. The embarrassment was visible on her face. "I understand. I'm very sorry. It won't happen again." She touched Ethan's arm. "Let's go." David turned his back and picked up Ava's bag. "Let's go home, Ava." He started pushing the wheelchair. Ava looked back, briefly meeting Ethan's eyes. There was something in that look. Confusion, embarrassment, but also curiosity. Then they turned the corner, and the moment passed. In the car, David kept his hand steady on the steering wheel. The anger was still pulsing through his veins. Who did that boy think he was? What right did he have to approach Ava like that? "Dad," Ava began, her voice low, "I don't want to talk about it." But he was just— "Ava." David cut her off more firmly. "That was inappropriate. You were tired, just coming out of physical therapy, and he invaded your space." End of story. A heavy silence filled the car. Then Ava said something that caught him completely off guard. "Are you angry at him or at God?" David slammed the brake harder at the red light. "What did you say?" "Nothing." Ava turned back to the window. "Forget it." But David didn't forget. The words echoed in his mind all night long. Weeks passed. The routine stayed the same. Painful exercises, no progress, silence in the car. But he noticed something different about her. During physical therapy sessions, she seemed thoughtful. Sometimes he caught her looking down the hallway, as if she were searching for someone. David didn't ask. He didn't want to open that subject. Then, 3 weeks after that encounter, something happened. It was a Tuesday. Ava was in the middle of a particularly difficult session. Karen was helping her with deep stretches, the kind that always left Ava with her eyes closed, breathing through the pain. Suddenly, Ava opened her eyes. "Wait!" Karen stopped immediately. "What is it? Are you okay?" "I felt something." David stood up from his chair in the hallway, moving closer to the glass window. "Felt what?" Karen asked, already performing basic tests. "In my thigh. It was like a sharp sensation, or tingling. I don't know how to explain it." Karen touched Ava's leg at several points. "Here? No. Here? No, wait. There. I felt it when you touched there." Karen ran the test again, then once more. Her face remained professional, but David saw something in her eyes. Surprise? Confusion? "I'll note this," Karen said calmly. "We'll monitor it." When the session ended, David helped Ava back into her chair without saying anything, but his mind was racing. Sensation. Ava had felt something. In the car she seemed more animated than she had been in weeks. "Dad, did you hear? I really felt it. It wasn't my imagination." "I heard you, sweetheart, but like Karen said, it could be—" Ava interrupted him, firm. "I know the difference. It was real." David didn't respond. He just drove. But as he navigated the familiar streets, a date echoed in his mind. 3 weeks. Exactly how long it had been since that young man had knelt down and prayed. David gripped the steering wheel tighter. Coincidence. It had to be coincidence. The following Thursday, the sensations repeated themselves, stronger this time. Ava was able to identify when Karen touched her leg at 3 different points. Karen suggested scheduling an appointment with Ava's neurologist. The doctor ran several tests. "There's something interesting here," he said, analyzing the results with Ava and David in his office. "There is minimal activity that wasn't present in previous exams." David felt his heart race. "What does that mean?" The doctor hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know. In cases like Ava's, changes are extremely rare. When they do happen, they're usually gradual over the course of years. This here," he pointed to the graphs, "is far too sudden." "But it's good, right?" Ava asked. "It means I'm getting better?" "We'll monitor it closely," the doctor said carefully. "I don't want to create expectations. These could be temporary signals, but yes, it is intriguing." In the following weeks, the improvements continued. Slow, very slow, but real. First, Ava managed to move the toes of her right foot slightly, just a little, but voluntary movement. Something doctors had said was impossible. David hired specialized physical therapists for daily sessions at home. Expensive equipment, anything to take advantage of any window of recovery that might exist. Karen increased the intensity of the exercises at the clinic. And with every session, every small victory, David couldn't stop thinking. 3 weeks after that young man's prayer. He tried to rationalize it. The treatments were working. Ava's body was responding to constant stimulation. It was science, not a miracle. But a part of him, a small but growing part, couldn't ignore the coincidence. June arrived, bringing longer, warmer days. David couldn't get the image of the young man kneeling and praying to the Virgin Mary out of his head. The coincidence of the dates troubled him. How does a man who has spent his entire life trusting logic and reason deal with something he cannot explain? On Friday morning, David made a decision. He left work early, drove to the clinic. Not at the time of Ava's physical therapy, but in the middle of the afternoon, when he knew Margaret would be working. He found her at the reception desk, organizing papers. "Margaret?" She looked up, recognized him immediately. Her face tightened. "Mr. Morrison." "Does your daughter have a session today?" "No, David took a deep breath. "I need to talk to you. And to your son." Margaret grew very quiet. "About what?" "About that day." "Mr. Morrison, I already apologized. Ethan won't—" "No," David interrupted her. "It's not that. It's just that Ava is improving in a way the doctors can't explain, and the improvements started exactly after that day." Margaret blinked, processing. "You're saying that—" "I don't know what I'm saying," David admitted. "I only know that my daughter wants to meet your son, and I would like you to come." Margaret was silent for a long moment. "You were very clear that day about what you thought of Ethan's prayers." The words stung, but they were true. "I know, and I was wrong, completely wrong." David gripped the edge of the reception counter. "Look, I'm not saying I believe in miracles. I don't know what I believe. But I do know I was rude to you when all your son wanted was to help, and I wanted to apologize." Margaret studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Ethan gets off work at 6. I can ask if he wants to come." "Thank you, Margaret." On Saturday morning, David was more nervous than he had been in years. Ava, too. She made him check the house 3 times, making sure everything was in order. At 3 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. David opened the door. Margaret was there with Ethan beside her. The young man looked exactly as David remembered. Jeans, button-down shirt. He looked at David without hostility, just with calm curiosity. "Ethan, Margaret." David extended his hand. "Thank you for coming." Ethan shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for inviting us, Mr. Morrison." They went inside. David led them to the living room, where Ava was waiting in her wheelchair. "Ava," he said, "these are Margaret and Ethan." Ava smiled, extending her hand. "Hi." "Thank you for coming, and—" She looked at Ethan. "Thank you for praying for me." Ethan took her hand, a small smile appearing. "How are you? Are your legs better?" "Yes," Ava answered honestly. "I still can't walk, but I can feel them now, and I can move my toes. The doctors say it's uncommon." Ethan nodded as if he had expected exactly that. These things take time, but they will improve more. It wasn't arrogance, it was just quiet certainty. Over the next 2 hours, something extraordinary happened. Ethan and Ava talked like old friends. He told her about his job at the library, about the books he liked most. She talked about ballet, about what it was like to dance, about how much she missed it. "You will dance again," Ethan said with the same calm certainty. "I don't know if I will," Ava replied, but there was hope in her voice. "But even if I can't dance ballet, at least I want to walk." David watched from the kitchen, where he was making coffee with Margaret. There was something in the way Ethan spoke to Ava. No pity, no discomfort, just honest conversation between two people. "Your son is special," David said quietly. Margaret smiled. "He always has been. Since he was little, he sees things others don't. Pain, sadness, and he always wants to help." She paused. "Ethan is autistic. Some people don't understand the way he connects with others, but it's genuine." "It always has been." David nodded, feeling the weight of how he had reacted on that first day. "I judged you," David admitted. "That day, I judged you very badly. You were protecting your daughter, I understand. Even so, I shouldn't have reacted that way." When it was time to leave, Ava held Ethan's hand. "Will you come back?" "If your father allows it," David stepped closer. "Of course. You're welcome here any time you want, Ethan." "Both of you are." Ethan's face lit up. "Can I come next Saturday?" "Yes, you can." After Margaret and Ethan left, David found Ava still in the living room looking out the window. "What did you think of him?" "He's different from anyone I've ever met." "How so?" He truly believes. It's not just what he says, it's who he is." Ava turned to look at her father. "And I think you're starting to believe too." David didn't answer, but he didn't need to. The months that followed brought more changes than David could have imagined. Ethan visited every Saturday. Sometimes Margaret came with him. Sometimes he came alone. He and Ava developed a true friendship. They talked about everything: religion, books, music, dreams. And Ava kept improving. After 4 months, she could move both legs a few centimeters. After 5, she managed to stand with support for 10 seconds. The doctor followed each bit of progress with a mixture of fascination and medical confusion. "This shouldn't be possible," he said more than once. "But it's happening." It was on a Saturday in September that it happened. Ava was in the backyard with Ethan. David watched them from the porch. They were talking about something, laughing. Then Ava braced herself on the arms of the chair. Ethan stood beside her, ready to help if needed, and Ava stood up. Not only did she stand, she took 3 steps, unsteady, shaky, but real steps. "Ethan, look!" Her voice was full of pure joy. "I'm walking." Ethan smiled, but without surprise. "I knew you would make it." David ran down from the porch, his heart racing. He reached them just as Ava needed to lean again. "Ava, how did you—" "I just felt like I could try." She was laughing and crying at the same time. "And I did it!" They weren't many steps, and she had to return to the chair shortly after, exhausted. But they were real steps, impossible, according to every doctor, but real. David looked at Ethan, who stood there with his calm smile. "Thank you," David said, his voice breaking. "I don't know how, I don't know why, but thank you." Ethan simply nodded. "It wasn't me. It was the Virgin Mary. I just asked her to help." And maybe that is the greatest truth of this entire story. Sometimes help comes from places we don't expect, from people we judge unfairly, from forces we cannot measure or explain. David Morrison spent his entire life trusting calculations and solid structures. But it was a young man with simple, direct faith who showed him that there are things in this world beyond logic, things like hope, like faith, like miracles that happen when we least expect them. Today, Ava walks. Not without difficulty, not without support at times, but she walks. She does not dance ballet professionally. That dream was left behind, but she found new purpose teaching young children, sharing her love for dance in other ways. Ethan continues working at the library. He continues praying for people he sees suffering, and he continues being Ava's friend. And David? David learned to accept that not everything needs an explanation, that control has its limits, that sometimes all we can do is have faith and allow things greater than ourselves to take their course. He is still an architect. He still designs buildings, still calculates foundations. But now when he looks at his blueprints, He remembers that the most important structures in life cannot be drawn on paper. They are built with love, faith, and the willingness to accept help, even when it comes in ways we never imagined. Before we finish, I want to invite you to be part of our prayer community to the Virgin Mary, a space of faith and hope where people from all over the world come together to pray and share graces received. If you feel in your heart the desire to be part of this prayer chain, click below and become a channel member today, and come pray with us. And look, if you made it all the way here, to the end of David, Ava, and Ethan's story, do one thing for me. Write in the comments 3 steps, the impossible steps that proved faith can move much more than mountains. I want to see how many hearts this story truly reached. And every time I read 3 steps in the comments, I'll know that one more person believes that miracles of the Virgin Mary still happen. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Write in the comments about a miracle you have witnessed or experienced, and share this video with someone who needs renewed hope today. May the Virgin Mary continue blessing and protecting you and your family. Amen.